Okay, I think that is it. I think I might have been able to make it so you guys can chat. Let's just test it out. Seeing hands coming up. Open Asunder, welcome. You are the first one. Hello, Sean. Hello, Jason. Hello, Krishni. Where is everybody joining from today? I'm in Durban. Feels like it's in the high 30s degrees. It's definitely a warm one. Has been a warm week. Carletonville, Cape Town, Mauritius, wonderful. A lot of Cape Town. Hugh Joburg, Logan from Namibia. How is the weather there? Toini, also from Namibia. Welcome to you guys from outside of South Africa. Gertrude from Pretoria. Rena Joburg, Lupuno from Pretoria. Wonderful. I'm not able to keep up with all of these, but Marlise from Windhoek, Rustenburg, Durban, Joburg. Okay, a few Durbans as well. Hashim, it is very warm in Durbs, I can confirm. You might be able to hear a fan in the background. I have my aircon on as hard as it will go, as cool as it will go, and my fan is blowing as well, and it is still very warm in my office here. Joburg, Brazil and Katu. Hi everyone. It's wonderful to have you all with us. Swatini as well. Hello, welcome to you. I know I'm missing out a lot of you, but I'm doing my best. Okay, guys, it's 5 past the hour, so I think let's start getting into things. How many of you have attended one of these webinars with me before? If you could just raise your hand if you have been in one of these webinars with me before, just to give a sense. See a few hands going up. This will give you an idea of who's joining for the first time. Don't do anything if you are joining for the first time. Just raise your hand if you have been in one of these with me before. Okay. Good. So there are a few of you who are returning. You are most welcome. It's great to have you back. But the vast majority of you, from what I can tell, are joining these webinars for the first time. And that is great to have you with us. My name is James. I'm James Sturdee. I am a registered psychological counselor. I'm practicing therapist in practice in Durban. I'm in private practice in Morningside in Durban. And I also do a lot of work with Region Business School. I head up the counseling services at Region Business School, and that is why we are seeing each other today. I do a lot of the student counseling, staff counseling as well, and then a lot of these webinars and 21st century skills development, soft skills development. That's a lot of the services that I offer in my private practice. I've been registered with the Health Professions Council since 2010. So this is my 15th year of practice. In my private practice, I've been, this is my 9th year. I think I went out on my own in 2016. And the things I work with, I work a lot with couples, couple counseling, relationship counseling. I do a lot of work with individuals on anger management and trauma and grief. I work a lot with certain types of depression and anxiety, and really anyone who's just struggling to figure out some conflict that they might have in their life, something that's not quite making sense, something that's causing them some type of discomfort. These are the things that I would typically work with, and these are the people that I would typically see in my practice. Counseling is available to all registered Region Business School students as well. And I assume that means most of you guys. So I will put my email address in the chat as well, just so it's there. If anyone is interested in setting up a counseling session at any time, it's completely confidential. You are welcome to email me. We can do so. If you're not in Durban, we do it online. Just share my email address there. You're welcome to reach out at any point. But yeah, nice to see such a full house today. It seems like at the beginning of 2025, a lot of you are interested in goal setting, right? And I think there's probably very good reasons for that. So the idea of today's webinar is to speak a little bit about the psychology behind setting goals, why we find it hard, what we can do to kind of hack ourselves somewhat to be able to achieve the goals that we set, how to set good goals, effective goals, how to make sure that the goals that we set are not unrealistic. These are some things we're going to cover today. Goals are, it's not necessarily a completely new idea or a concept to most people. We speak about goal setting a lot in our normal lives. I think it's not that you have to have a degree in psychology to have any expertise in this or to have come across the concept. But hopefully, as we kind of talk today, we'll get a bit of just go back to the basics on it, and then hopefully I'll share some ideas that might be at least refocus your energies and help you understand a little bit more how to set yourself up for success there. Great. So yeah, once again, welcome to everybody. Great to have so many of you with us from all around the region. There's lots of people in South Africa and out. I see that. And then also we have people from far away as Mauritius. So wonderful. I am going to try to keep an eye on the chat as I go through this webinar. So I will keep an eye on it. If there are any comments that are coming up, please, or any thoughts that you have that are coming up, questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I might not see all of them, but I'll do my best from time to time just to check in on that chat. You're welcome to put it in there. It doesn't disturb me at all. If I miss it, we will have time for a Q&A at the end as well, just before the hour. I'll leave a little bit of time so any questions or any thoughts that you want to share, there'll be time for that as well. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I would like to just ask you guys a question. If you were to assess yourselves, ask yourself a very simple question. How effective are you at setting goals? In your own life, in your own experience up until this point, I imagine there's a very kind of distribution of ages from the just coming out of school to those of you who might be more experienced learners. How effective have you been in your life at setting goals? You put in the chat. So from 1 to 10. So 1 means you just can't do it. You set goals, you never seem to be able to achieve any of them ever. 10 means you're pretty effective. When you set a goal, you're quite likely to get it, to achieve it. Okay, so we have a number of scores all the way from 2 to 7 so far is what I'm getting. 6 5s. They seem to be kind of grouping around the average of 5, so not so good, not so bad, kind of mid-level success there. It would depend on which personal goals. Johannine, that's a good point, yeah. You average it out. But personal goals might be different to professional goals. That's a fair point. Evelyn is 9. I'd love to hear how you do it, Evelyn. If you want to share your insights on the chat, it's really good. I see Desiree also very high. Irene very high. A few of you a little bit lower. You would think that this webinar might select for people who find it a little bit harder, right? So if you find goal setting very easy, probably less likely to make time in a busy week on the middle of a Wednesday for a goal setting webinar. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But maybe if you find it a challenge, you're more likely to find the time. So the fact that you were able to say, I want to attend this webinar on goal setting, and you were able to do that, well, you've already achieved a goal there. So that just proves some competence there. Evelyn's reason for her success is she is older. Okay, fair enough. Alicia made a good point earlier, which is setting goals is easy and achieving them is a lot harder. That's a fair point. I know it's tongue-in-cheek, but I think there's wisdom to that as well. And that's partly what we'll cover today, which is the way we set our goals, types of goals we set will affect our success. So if we set wildly unrealistic goals, we're probably not going to get those. And then our success rate, our batting average goes down a bit there as well. So the way we set goals is actually quite important in our ability to achieve the goals. The reason this matters to us, I think, the reason we care about setting goals is that there's this unstoppable march of time, right? So we're constantly kind of just being swept along in this slow moving process that is our lives. And we're never able to really, it's very hard to just stop and to kind of, pay attention to where we are right now, because the hustle and bustle goes on. So many things demanding our attention, so many deadlines, stresses, and things, and people we need to make happy. And before we know it, we look back and, another year has passed. And then we think, well, wow, what could I have done? How do I reflect on where I am at right now? Am I where I wanted to be? And people often have these very uncomfortable realizations, right? They look at their lives and they think, gosh, I'm turning, this is me, right? I'm 39 now, so I'm turning 40 next year. People will get to milestones like that and I think, Is this where I want it to be? Is this how I imagined myself when I was 21 or when I was 10? And that can bring up a lot of discomfort. We put so much pressure on ourselves there and go, I haven't done this or I haven't done that. It's very rare that someone will go and say, yeah, I've done all the things that I wanted to do. So we accept that there's this kind of slow, irresistible time horizon that's dragging us along. And we think, well, if I was able to set some goals now, what that means is my future self would be able to reap the benefits of that, right? So if I was able to kind of do whatever I need to do now, there would be a future version of me that would be a success. And I think that's why the idea of goal setting is such an appealing idea, because it makes us think, if I could just figure out this thing, the secret sauce, this formula for setting goals, that would open me up to this successful version of myself. And that's not completely false, as we'll discuss, but also I think it kind of offers perhaps to sell us something that's not quite real. I think there's something a little bit more to the whole process of, suddenly being able to kind of hack this idea of setting goals, and then all of a sudden we're able to just find the success later on in our lives. And I think, there's a number of reasons, but one of the things as well is that the way we define success often evolves as we grow as well. So that the goals we set for ourselves now aren't necessarily based on the same things that were important to us 20 years ago. The goals you might have set when you were 10, you might, as a 30-year-old or 40-year-old, be looking at those and go, well, I'm glad I haven't achieved any of those. But often they're about wealth, right? I have wanted this amount of money, or I wanted to have this type of degree. And the failure to achieve the things we set out for ourselves, often that comes with a lot of self-judgment, and then we say, okay, well, I need to figure this out. I need to become better at setting goals. So there are benefits to setting goals, of course. There are significant benefits. This idea of goal setting is about intentionality, right? It's saying, my life, whatever I do now, provided I stay alive, in a year's time, I will be a year older. So I get to choose what that might look like there, right? I have some agency to say, how do I live intentionally? How do I make choices that are actually going to be show good judgment in terms of rewarding my future self? So goal setting is a very important aspect of living an examined life. An examined life just means we pay attention to ourselves, we pay attention to our lives, we pay attention to the way they're set up, we pay attention to the relationships that we're in, we pay attention to how we show up in various parts, we pay attention to our inner psychological workings, we pay attention to the choices that we make every day. And essentially that's goal setting. Is you can kind of distill it down to this idea that I say that I'm going to do something, and then I'm able to make those choices to make that thing happen. That's intentionality, to be able to kind of look at our choices and say, okay, well, I want to make this, I want this thing to happen. How do I make sure that it will? I want to have my master's degree in 6 years' time. How do I make sure that happens? Well, it's about the choices I make now, right? So I have to kind of do some of the hard yards in the process right now. If I'm just not even applying, or I'm not doing this bridging course that I need to do, then I'm not living in the same, I kind of have these lofty goals, but I'm doing nothing in the meantime to get there. So the capacity to set goals allows us then to kind of reach out into the future and say, well, this is what I would like my life to look like there. Research is very strong on this. If you are a goal setter, you're much more likely to achieve success in your life, rather than someone who's kind of just a little bit more haphazard and lets things happen. Success can be achieved in many ways, and of course success can be defined in many ways. There's lots of metrics of success. One big bank balance is one way of defining success. A house, a car, those are the kind of material displays of success. But often success just comes down to relationships as well. We often don't think about success in those terms, right? Do I want to be successful in my relationships? That's not just being in a relationship, it's having a relationship that's healthy and fulfilling, rewarding, and there's connection. Success might be in the way I live my life. I might want to live my life in a way that is meaningful, whatever that might be. It comes down to the values that we have. What might be meaningful would be helping other people, right? Or legacy for us, or impact. These are the different types of ways we can measure success. But the research showed that if we set goals, we're much more likely to achieve success in these areas. And you flip this around, of course, that these successful people, when we poll them and we ask them what do they have, it's a lot of them, the vast majority of them say, well, I set goals for myself. I'm intentional about the choices I make, intentional about the objectives, the aspirations I set for myself, and I break it down and find ways of achieving them. So there is a really significant relationship between goal setting and success, in whatever domain. Debbie, trying to set too many goals at one time also becomes a problem. There's no doubt about that. I think we can overwhelm ourselves with goals, and then often that just becomes a case of saying, well, if there's too much, then it's just not realistic, and then we don't do any of them. So overcomplicating things that can lead to our downfall as well. And we also live in a very kind of optimizing culture right now, right? With all these podcasts and YouTube channels and self-help books, which are a little bit more dated, but it's all kind of evolved into this optimizing. Everything has to be optimal. We've got to be as effective and as productive, and we have to live the most fulfilling lives. We have to be physically fit, mentally sharp, and that can put a huge amount of pressure on people as well. So you can kind of set all of these goals around your life, and then find yourself completely overwhelmed by that. So the first starting points is just saying, well, what do I really want? Because the why of goals matters. Because of course, if the goals mean anything, they're probably going to be difficult to achieve at some level. There are going to be times when it's hard. So the why matters a lot. When we're finding it hard to find the motivation, we need to go back to why. Why did I actually set this goal for myself? Was it because my family wanted me to do it? Did I think other people would be impressed with it? Or is it a little bit more intrinsic and based on what I want for myself? So it can be in a number of different domains. So is it about health, right? What do I want with regards to my health in the future? What about my career? What kind of family life do I want? Is this something that's important to me, or is it something that perhaps for the next 10 years I'm willing to park? And what about lifestyle? What type of life do I want to live? Do I want a life that's kind of based on work or family, or do I want to find a balance? Do I want to really prioritize my experiences, travel, and not worry as much about work, what's important to me? And then do this exercise of imagining yourself in the year 2030 or 2035, 2050. How do you see yourself? What realistic? What would you like? What type of life would you like to be living? And you can do this exercise in reverse as well. You can say, well, the year 2025 right now, if I imagine myself where I am right now, and I went back to 2010, and I asked them, and this will depend on your age. Maybe you were only 5 at the time. Maybe you were 20. But if you go back, 10, 15 years, let's just say 2020, for the purpose of this, what would that younger version of you think right now about where you are? And as I said earlier, sometimes there's discomfort and kind of all this pressure that we put on ourselves for not achieving. But also a lot of the time we look back and we say, there's actually a lot to be grateful for right now. And then we can also reframe the way we think about our goal setting and success, because probably you'll find, maybe without being the most conscious or intentional goal setter, you've actually probably achieved a fair amount of the goals that you might have try to. It really just depends about the framing you put on it, right? Is it enough what you have right now? Is there a lot to be grateful for? Or do you feel you're completely falling short and letting down that younger version of yourself? And then it's important that your goals, especially the important goals, are aligned with your core values. So values, it's just in the name. It's what's valuable to you, what's important to you in your life. And again, that might evolve over time, but typically it's going to there's going to be these themes that run through your life that are, what are the most important things? Is it family? Is it wealth? Is it experience? Is it legacy? Is it impact? Is it enjoyment? Is it sacrifice? Is it helping people? Whatever it might be. Once you have those core values, it's important that the goals align. Because if you're setting goals that are completely kind of not aligned to your core values, you're going to start failing at them, and probably going to be heaping judgment on yourself. Where again, you're probably setting yourself up for that failure. So if you say, well, I want to live a creative life, right? I want to have really meaningful experiences. I want to surround myself with interesting people. And then you kind of focus all of your goals on your professional life, your academic life. You might find that you lose your way along the way. But of course, it's not easy. We historically, as human beings, find it hard to have the sacrifice and the discipline and the motivation in the short term to do the things that we probably know are better for ourselves in the long term. So it's easy right now to say, okay, well, the long term version of me, my future self, would appreciate me making certain choices right now. So the future James would be very grateful if the current James would go out for a run today, because that means the future James is going to be just a little bit kgs, a few kgs slimmer and stronger, and probably going to live a little bit longer. That's all very well, but the current James is going, well, I'm actually a little bit tired. I've had a long day. It's 38 degrees outside. I don't think it's going to happen. And in doing so, we're kind of giving up some promise to the future version of ourselves. This idea of instant gratification versus delayed gratification, right? It's quite hard for our current selves, where we've evolved to live in the moment and take what's in front of us in a kind of feast or famine way. This often our ancestors lived in times of scarcity, right? So if there was a feast, you would eat all the feast. You wouldn't save it. And this is this idea of kind of instant gratification. The problem is we live in a world right now where there's so much abundance in front of us. If you wanted to, you could eat as many chocolates as you could eat right now, probably. Your ancestor from 100,000 years ago didn't have that luxury. So we're kind of so easily tempted out of this ability to delay our satisfaction, our gratification. Of course, motivation and energy will decrease over time right now. So when you're watching the Comrades Marathon on whatever date, 9th of June or whenever it is, you think, this is really what I want to do. Imagine that, man. Imagine me out there running this. I'm going to do it. You watch me from now and start putting a training plan together. And probably the next day you go for a run. I don't know if you've noticed that the day after the Comrades Marathon, the roads are full with people who didn't run the Comrades Marathon the day before. But that decreases, that feeling of this is so important to me right now, that decreases over time, right? And life starts to take over. So in a week's time, you're pretty slightly less motivated, but probably still running. 3 months' time, probably not. And definitely in 6 months' time. There's a drop off that happens. It's normal. But knowing that it happens is an important way of protecting for it. Fear of failure is a big one as well, right? So if I set myself this frightening goal, I want to have my master's in 6 years. That's something I really want. It feels really big. I can't really imagine it, but it's something I really want. But what happens if I don't do it, right? What if I set this goal for myself and then I fail? How terrible is that going to feel? And the one thing as human beings that we are very good at, we don't need any training for, is we avoid the things that cause us pain, discomfort. So if the idea of failure is one that's causing us a lot of discomfort, we're going to just avoid it and stay away from it. And one way of doing that is just don't set goals at all, right? What happens, happens. If I get there, I get there. There is some value to a little bit of a flexible approach to life and not necessarily being overly rigid in how we think about the future, because life is uncertain and unpredictable. And the saying, we make plans and God laughs, things will surprise us. So there's something to be said for a little bit of flexibility. But if we're overly flexible, again, it decreases the likelihood that we're going to get this thing that actually matters to us. And that fear of failure often is something that makes us just say, well, I don't even want to say it. I don't want to tell anyone about it. I don't want to even tell myself, acknowledge that it's something that I want, because that seems frightening that I might not get it. We're often, again, not very good at setting goals. Right. We often set goals in a way that are unclear, unstructured. So I want to lose weight. That's a goal that I had. What does that really mean? 100 grams? Would that mean your goal is set over what time period? If you put on a few kgs, have you failed? Is it over a year? What does it actually mean? And then how do you get there? Right. That's the structure to goal achievement. What does the path look like to getting to this goal that I set for myself? We often just set the final goal, I want to be married. And that's kind of all vague, and it's kind of, a bit unclear and unfocused in the future. There's no actual breakdown of, well, what does it actually mean? What's the action plan for getting there? And without that, we often lose our way quite quickly. And then what that does is it further then undermines our belief in our capacity to actually set goals, right? If we have a couple of occasions where we set a goal and then we kind of fall away from it, New Year's resolutions are classic examples of this. We set a New Year's resolution 3 weeks into the year, we've already fallen. That makes us much less likely to want to set another one. And this is often why New Year's resolutions people are kind of quite contemptful of them. They kind of mock them a lot, don't they? They say, well, oh yeah, what a waste of time. Because I think we realize the failure rate makes us not take them as seriously. And it's the same with general goal setting. If we kind of have these times where we set goals and nothing's happened, we often go, well, I don't really want to go through that again. Number one, there's no point. And also it feels pretty bad to not be following through on the things that I'm committed to. One of the big reasons for failure as well when it comes to achieving our goals is this failure to have a mental image of what the journey will actually look like, right? So we don't really imagine what the hard days will look like, the hard moments will. And so we get there and it takes us by surprise. And we go, well, this was not part of the bargain, right? There's something really powerful, and we'll speak about this just a little bit later in this webinar as well. There's something really powerful about being able to foreshadow failure and say, this is what it's going to feel like at the hardest times. I know how hard it's going to be. You think about studying, for example. It's great. You imagine yourself on graduation day, your family's there, you're smiling on top of the stage with your gown. Wonderful. It's easy to imagine that, and all sorts of good feelings are associated with that. It's harder to imagine those lonely days when all your friends are out. It's harder. We often don't spend as much time thinking about the sacrifices we'll have to make and how hard that'll be. And if we're able to do that, it gives us a bit of preparation for it. And then it allows us to invest some meaning in that hardship as well, because it's not just hardship, it's intentional deprivation. So it's saying, I am intentionally depriving myself of a pleasurable experience right now in order to gain something bigger for it. That's the idea of sacrifice. And then we think, well, I'm not just, lonely and sad here. I'm involved in some type of meaningful sacrifice for myself. And that becomes a much more meaningful process. And so we're more likely to find some resolve as we're going through it. And that can start to associate with more positive feelings of, of grit and determination and hope for the future. And then we often don't understand the dance between our biology and our psychology. So this is it's just an idea of our minds versus our bodies, essentially, right? So our brain is one thing. Our brain is the physical clump of neurons and neurotransmitters that we have in our heads, stored safely within our craniums. That's our brain. Our mind is the more kind of higher level things that are happening there that we kind of are, they're intangible. We can't touch them. It's our consciousness, memory, and thoughts, feelings, fears, our hopes. All of these are happening in our minds. But because our mind is this emergent property of our brain, so the thoughts that we have are all coming out of the neurons that we have and this process that happens there. But our brains are biological structures, right? And they reside within our bodies. We've created this artificial divide to say, well, our brains are here and our bodies are here, and never the two will meet. But actually, our brains are so influenced by our biology and so interlinked with the other parts of our body. And we kind of surprise ourselves. I think we know this, but then we're surprised when we see the effects of it. The idea that stress can make us sick. Why should that be surprising? Why would it be with you think about psychosomatic complaints. So psychosomatic complaints is when I'm some type of distress psychologically, and then that presents as a physical illness. It might be paralysis in my arm, for example. I'm so worried about something, and now I can't move my arm. And that we kind of surprised, we go, wow, the mind is so powerful. But of course it is, because why would it not be? It's part of the same thing. It's part of our body. All of this is just our body. This is a materialistic, naturalistic view, which is to say and you can have views about the soul and spiritual. That's something slightly different. It's just to say the experience of being me is very much tied up in my biology and what it means for my body to actually just be working at a fundamental level, like the things that are automatic breathing and heart beating. So all of that to say, when we're setting goals, we're setting them within our physiology as well. So the constraints that we might have are not just kind of in our thoughts and our fears and the barriers we have for ourselves mentally. Some of the barriers are also happening in our biology, and understanding that can be helpful as well. yeah, just checking in on some of the comments before I move on to the next slide to speak a bit more about this biology. So yeah, passion is important, Eugene. Absolutely. That comes down to also the values and the why and the things that are important to you. We'll speak a little bit about the fear of failure. Yeah, company peer pressure, and a number of you are making that point as well. The people that you surround yourself with, I think there's something about that. There's a kind of culture of accountability, and you can see people who stick to the goals and people who don't, and that kind of comes down to value hierarchy, what's important to the people that we surround ourselves with. Absolutely true. Okay, so let's talk about this biology. So I won't spend a huge amount of time in it just because we're kind of racing through the hour, but just to give you an idea, and there's a number of ways this plays out. But what I find one of the really interesting dances between our biology and our psychology is this idea of blood pressure, right? So over there is a picture of a heart, slightly different from the heart we always imagine, right? You can see how they got there when, I heart you. It's a little bit more, let's just say biological for want of a better term. So that's a heart. Your heart, as you all know, pumps your blood around your body. It's kind of a plumbing system for blood. That's where the pump is. And if we're looking at blood pressure, essentially what we're saying is what is the pressure within that system, that vascular system, the veins that go around, arteries and the veins that go through your body when your heart is pumping. So there's systolic and diastolic pressure. One of those measures when your heart contracts and the blood goes out, and one measures when your heart retracts. That's your diastolic pressure. So you kind of have that two different pressure systems of numbers. That's the kind of fairly average blood pressure that I put there. As you can see there, 120/60, it all depends, but typically we think about low blood pressure as being life-threatening and high blood pressure as being life-threatening. They call it the silent killer, high blood pressure. It's kind of think about this constant high pressure that's running throughout your body. And of course, there's a relationship between high blood pressure and stress as well. But generally, we think about a kind of lower mid-range blood pressure to be better, although you will see some natural fluctuation in your blood pressure as you go through the day, just like everything else kind of fluctuates within our bodies. The thing with blood pressure, though, is there is something that happens when we mentally imagine taking action. What actually happens, research shows there is an increase in our blood pressure. So people who imagine getting up to go off the couch, to go for a run, just the idea of imagining that increases the blood pressure, and that then activates us for action. So slightly higher blood pressure is actually really good for action, for exertion. And this is why stress and blood pressure are related, because if we are stressed, what we're having is a stress response, a little bit of cortisol that's released into our blood, into our systems. And because of that, we have slightly higher blood pressure that allows us then to kind of respond to whatever threat we believe is in front of us. This is the stress response. The fight or flight response, the version of the trauma response is more severe process, but the same thing that's essentially happening. High blood pressure that allows us to fight, to run away, to be a bit stronger, to do all of the things that we need to do for our survival, to protect ourselves. But if we're under constant stress, well, then our blood pressure is constantly higher, and then our bodies are not really meant to be running at that level, and that can be dangerous. So when we have this mental image of action, okay, I'm going to do something now, there's actually an increase in our blood pressure that allows us then to act. And when we think about achieving a goal, there's something stress relieving in that process itself. So we see a decrease in our blood pressure. So nothing's changing in our world, nothing's changing in our actual behavior. We're imagining something, and through that, we're seeing a change in our blood pressure. So you can see how it's stress relieving, perhaps, to imagine a goal, right? To imagine a goal in the future, to imagine yourself again on that stage, getting the degree you've always wanted. That feels good, and through that feel good feeling, you actually have a little bit of a decrease in the blood pressure, and so that can then have a link between that and goal-oriented behaviors. Actually, when we start to imagine the outcomes of our goals, we actually start to feel a little bit less stressed, which is great if our objective was to feel less stressed. That would be fantastic. If our objective is to get up off the couch and actually tie our shoes and go out there and do something, it actually becomes counterproductive. So having to spend too much time talking about our goals or visualizing the actual end result of our goals, that can make us less likely to achieve our goals, which is a kind of productive or counterintuitive result that they found with this. And it's one of those things that we can hack as well. Again, we can start to think about how our bodies respond to the way we think about our goals, and how perhaps the feeling of, just soothing ourselves with saying, okay, well, I've set the goal and that is enough. Often that's enough, just the process of setting the goal. That feels great. I've told everyone about it. They kind of look at me and go, wow, that's amazing. Well done. You're going to do great. And then I'm feeling a little bit less stressed and I don't do anything about it. And because I don't do anything about it, I actually don't ever do the work it takes me to get into that goal. That's a very powerful, very common thing that can happen there. And we see this same dance between the neurotransmitter dopamine, which I'm sure you guys have come across. It's having a moment right now in popular culture, this idea of dopamine, just because we are so dependent on so many things, technology, our phones, food, all of these, we kind of understand now how dopamine is playing a role in all of that. So essentially, dopamine is just a neurotransmitter. It's linked to motivation. It gives us this feel-good hit. It feels good when dopamine is released into our brains. So neurotransmitters are just the chemicals in our brains that communicate between the neurons. When dopamine is released, it feels really good. So it's kind of rewarding us for action, right? Humans in our prehistoric ages who kind of just lay around in the cave and didn't do anything, they didn't get any of that feel-good feeling, and so they died into part of their genes. The go-getter cavemen who are out there and kind of really doing what they could do to be the best versions of themselves, their brains were rewarding them with this dopamine hit. It felt good, so they did more of it. They were more go-getters. They passed on their genes, and those genes were proliferated around the population. So dopamine is just a way for our brains to kind of get us out there. It rewards us, and it helps with motivation as well. If we're getting too much dopamine from all of these cheap hits, right? Instagram gives you a dopamine hit. You look at it, you share the picture, and I get a like. That's dopamine hits. But it's a really kind of cheap way of flooding your system with dopamine, and eventually it stops having the same benefit. And because it stops having the same benefit, in the real world, it stops having the same benefit as well. So the things that might have been rewarding for you become less rewarding, right? So getting up and going out there and doing something that might have felt really good feels less good now because you kind of flooded with dopamine hits, experiences, rewards that you're getting from all around, and they start to be less effective, which means we have less motivation because of it. So these reinforce behaviors, and sometimes these behaviors are good for us, sometimes they're bad for us. Gambling is a very common and obvious way of maladaptive dopamine reinforcement. It feels good when the lights or the roulette table is the wheel is spinning, and I'm thinking I might win, and I do win. Dopamine floods me. I feel fantastic, and then I kind of I really want to do that. I really want to feel that feeling again, and then we do it again. And then you can see this online shopping felt really good to see the confirmation that my sale had gone through, and then I said my order's on the way, track my order. That feels great. That's dopamine that you're getting. That's that feel good feeling. And then you kind of go back into normal life and you're feeling a bit scratchy and not feeling so good. And you think, I really want to feel good again. How do I do it? Well, let me go online shop again. You're getting dopamine there. And that's reinforced maladaptive behavior. But anticipating a pleasurable event can give us an increase in dopamine itself. And this again goes back to the way we think about our goals, right? If we're kind of talking or thinking too much about the process of achieving our goal, then we're going to feel good about it. We're going to get that dopamine hit, but it's actually not going to reward us doing what we need to do. So it's the same with the blood pressure. We get some type of satisfaction through just thinking about it, but that doesn't translate into action. Action is where goals actually happen, right? The process of achieving goals happens through action. And these things, whether it's our blood pressure, whether it's this, the dopamine system not working as it should, these prevent us from taking the action that we would otherwise be taking. We're told all the time to visualize our goals, right? There's something about that. There's something about visualizing a goal if it's done in the right way. And sportsmen, elite sports people, they do this a lot as well. They kind of visualize the whole thing, right? So if you're running 400 meters, you visualize that whole track, visualize what might happen, what might go wrong. If you're doing something like golf, you visualize a shot, the flight of the ball. This can be quite helpful. If you're visualizing a long-term goal, though, and this is something we see with the vision boards. The vision board, you see in the picture there, you kind of put everything that supports you up there on the board, and then that will make you, the theory goes, that will make you more likely to achieve all those things. And to go back to what I was talking about at the beginning, that seems magical, right? If I can just put these things on a board, I can live this life that I always wanted to live. The Paris and money and family and a beautiful partner and these just incredible things. All I have to do is put on the board, and then I'm going to kind of miraculously find my way there. But the research shows, maybe not surprising, that's not the way that it works. So people with vision boards are actually less likely to achieve their goals, which seems kind of cruel in a way. They've got to the whole effort of putting together this vision board, and they're less likely to achieve their goals than the people who are just not doing that. So again, we're seeing a decrease in short-term stress. It's a great stress relieving exercise to put together a vision board. And it might be helpful for kind of figuring some things out in your life, but it doesn't actually help with goal achievements in the way that we think about. And this is where visualization needs to be slightly different, is we need to visualize the concrete process along the way. So what does it actually look like? Can I imagine myself along the journey, as opposed to getting so caught up in what that destination might be? And that requires a concrete plan of action. And for the same reasons, the research has also shown if you spend too much time talking about your goals and telling people about your goals, you're getting all of the benefits psychologically in the short term. Feels good. You're not feeling as stressed. You're feeling motivated. You're feeling, look at me, I'm such a kind of organized person. I'm so intentional. These are the things that I'm going to get. Look at me. And then because you feel better, you're actually not going to go out there. You're less likely, let's say, to go out there and do it. So there are three fundamental steps, I would say. This, through everything I've read and through everything I've kind of shared with the experiences of my clients over the course of my career, these are three fundamental steps, I think, that we kind of can come back to. And there's so many different models out there for setting goals, from SMART goals and everything else. But essentially, I think you can boil it down to three fundamental steps. So number one, don't make your goal too hard. Don't make it too easy. Make it challenging. So it should scare you a little bit. I think that's fair to say. Your goal should probably kind of make you feel a little bit intimidated by it. To ask yourself, can I do this? And if the answer is yes, then it's hard, but it's not too hard. It's too easy. People don't actually even try. Either they'll get there, anyway, and then what's the point of setting a goal, or they give up because it just actually doesn't interest them anymore. Or they'll forget that they actually set the goal because it's not stretching them. So your goal should stretch you for it to be worthwhile. You shouldn't stay in your comfort zone. But likewise, if you shoot too far out of your comfort zone, that's completely impossible or impractical, the likelihood of failure is much higher, which means the likelihood of losing faith in the whole goal setting process is much higher. And you kind of give up as soon as the going gets tough, because you say, well, I kind of knew this was possible, right? And then again, be concrete in your planning. So create a timeline, break it down. Think about the dates specifically when you would like to achieve this goal. That takes courage to put it down. So actually, I'm holding myself to this. There's accountability that comes with actually setting a target date. If you don't set a date, you can always kind of let yourself off the hook. So it takes courage to set a date and then break it down into medium-term milestones as well. So, the analogy of running a marathon is always helpful. If I'm running a marathon, I don't just think about the 42Ks. I think about getting through 10 first, right? And then I think about 15, and then I think about 20, and you break it down step by step, go through, and you imagine all the steps along the way. And if it's a complicated goal, I want to become a lawyer, for example. Well, what does that actually involve? That's such a vague thing. How am I actually going to do it? Well, it means that for the first week of this year, I'm going to research where I could apply. I'm going to, once based on that, I'm going to start applying, and then you kind of break it down. I want to be studying by this date. These are the pre-work I want to do. These are the people I want to speak to. You kind of get really specific with it. And then you foreshadow failure. So foreshadow failing means you just imagine that's what failure might look like, what might cause you to fail. This is not negativity. It's not saying this is going to happen, but saying realistically, this is a hard goal, and there are things that are going to challenge me along the way. What might they be? And once I understand what they might be, that gives me an opportunity to kind of proactively protect myself from them. And often it's protecting ourselves from ourselves, right? So what's likely to happen? Well, often, after 3 months, I start to find my interest waning. It doesn't seem as important, and I give up. Okay, well, how do I hold myself accountable to that? What type of commitment device do I need to kind of help me get through that 3-month period to keep going? How can I leverage? What can I leverage in my life? Who can I kind of keep? Who can I, bring on to keep me accountable? Whatever it might be, it allows you then to solve the potential problems that are going to happen along the way. This idea of foreshadowing failure. And if we foreshadow failure, it just means we focus on what we're trying to avoid, and this can be really effective. People who foreshadow failure actually are twice as effective, the research shows, at getting to their goals than visualizing just the end goal. So understand the potential roadblocks. We make contingency plans. This allows us to be prepared and not surprised by the challenges as they come. And then finally, in summary, let me go through just further strategies, a bit of what we've spoken about, and we'll wrap up with some Q&A after this. I noticed as I was going through, there are a couple of questions that I missed. I did see them, but I wasn't able to go through them. If you have a question right now, feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to it in the next couple of minutes. I'll address some of those. So you can, if you have posted a question that I haven't addressed, just copy and paste, keep it at the bottom. Okay, so hold yourself accountable. This is the culture of accountability. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And the way that we do this, it's culture because it's repeated behavior, right? It's kind of this idea of this is how I do things. This is what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And if I too often I'm saying I'm going to do something and then I don't do it, I'm creating a culture of unaccountability. I'm saying, well, it doesn't really matter, right? When I start to actually follow through on the things that I say, this then is accountability. And it's different from judgment. Judgment is saying I'm weak or I'm, lazy. It's just saying, no, forget about any value judgment you want to put in it. But if I say I'm going to do something, I do it, even if it involves discomfort, even if I don't want to do it. And one of the ways of getting there is say less about what you're going to do. Don't make commitments if you're not going to follow through on it. So you can think about it, commitments follow through, right? One way of culture of accountability is saying, okay, follow through, just follow through on everything. That's true. But also one way of making sure we follow through on everything is we commit ourselves to less. Commit yourself to things that are important, commit yourself to things that you are going to, that you can do, because if you don't, it's just lip service, you stop believing yourself as well. Keep accurate data on your progress. So often we don't know ourselves, or don't know where we're falling short, or we think that we're following a goal. Actually, we're not. I need to run 40 Ks a week, and I told myself, I think I am. And then we actually look at our Strava, and we're running 15 Ks a week. You can see why you might want to avoid that because you don't want to know it, but that's important information for you to have. So, well, I've set this goal for myself, and I'm falling, well short of it. What do I do about that? And there's lots of really good apps now as well, where you can kind of track data of anything, whatever you're doing. You can kind of, it checks in on you and it asks you, how much have you eaten today, or how much work have you done today, whatever the goal might be. So you're not always going to get it right. Setting perfect goals is not about kind of achieving everything all the time. It's about learning from the failures when they happen, and having a self-compassionate, kind approach to ourselves. We're human beings. We're not expected to be perfect, but there's so much opportunity to learn from the failures when they happen. Okay, so we want to pair lofty goals with concrete strategies. So you want your goals to kind of be up there, but you want your strategies to be locked in reality, right? You want your goals to kind of be up there, stretching you and think this is something I want, but it's hard, but I can do it. And your concrete strategies are, how do I actually get there? What do I actually do to get there? The right degree of challenge in the goal is important, not too easy, not too hard, and then fall in love with the process. If we make it all about the destination, we often lose ourselves before we get there, or we get there and it means less to us because we're on to the next thing. You can fall in love with the process of it, and it's possible to fall in love with sacrifice. It's possible to fall in love with some type of hardship. I'm not saying life should just be those things, but if we're able to do those things, we are really investing in the future version of ourselves. And it's possible to love that feeling as well. The hardship of it, the meaning of it, the sacrifice. That actually, we can fall in love with that should we allow ourselves to. Habit is such a powerful thing as a human being. I think we all recognize this, right? Things we do day by day, over and over again, we start doing without thinking about, we get drawn towards them as this magnetic pull. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. And if we can leverage it for the things that are important to us, then we're much more likely to be effective at set goals. Prepare for failure, which is not the same as expecting it necessarily, or being kind of predetermined about it. Just know that failure might happen, because realistically, that's part of the process, right? If I'm setting myself something that's hard over a period of time, failure might happen. How do I best prepare for that? And then break your big goals up into smaller goals, little kind of milestones as you go. These are rewarding as well. They give you some reward, as opposed to just saying, well, I'm going to get a reward myself when I get to the end. If the goal feels achievable, we're more likely to mobilize to achieve it. We're more likely to kind of get the energy to get going when we need to, when things are hard. And this is the narrative we tell ourselves about it. We're always telling ourselves stories about every situation in our lives. That can be really motivating as well. Okay, guys, thank you very much. I'm going to just look to see where there are some of the questions I missed. Thank you for all of your attendance as well. Again, so nice to have so many people in this joining us. You guys are chatting as we go, which is great. Okay, so I'm just going down to the last few. Okay, Eugene, how important is sleep and how many hours should one get? So sleep is one of the most important things. Also having a bit of a resurgence right now. People are seeing it as more important. Often it was the case that it was sleep is just the thing that we have to do before we carry on doing everything else, right? But right now, when it comes to health, when it comes to mental health, sleep is just, it's being shown over and over again to be so fundamental. So when you think about your psychology, right? Think about physical health, but on top of that, your mental health, your wellness. There are three components to it. Before you do anything else, you've got to think about nutrition, you've got to think about exercise, you've got to think about sleep. And if you're getting these three things, that's a foundation for everything else you're going to do in terms of your emotional, psychological wellness. And sleep is as important, if not more important than nutrition and exercise. So the reason it's important for goal setting is sleep allows us to, there's a creative component to it. It helps with problem solving. If we're able to kind of sleep well, we're much more likely to wake up refreshed. This is the idea of sleeping on it. This is an ancient wisdom. We sleep on something, we wake up, we see the problem differently. And a good night's rest often helps us to be creative to problem solve. That's a part of goal setting as well. But it just means we're going to be more focused. We're going to have more attention. We're going to have more energy as well. The right amount of sleep depends on your age, but typically they say between 7 and 9 hours a night is what you should be getting. Hard to do, but really worth prioritizing, even if it means giving up something else. Yes, so yes, Andres, the presentation will be on the Regent YouTube channel. You can check it there. Pumalela, what your question is, how will I track my progress? What type of checkpoints or milestones will help me stay on track? So again, you get really good apps for this, whatever it is. It depends on what your goal is, what area of your life you're focusing on. But if you have an app that you'll probably find there's an app for everything these days, that's helpful. It depends on the goal specifically. You break it down into milestones that you think will be helpful. You don't put it depends. If it's a year, you want to be kind of setting, I would say, weekly milestones, perhaps, depending what it is, maybe more, maybe less. Cookie, would you advise we get accountability partners to help keep us on track? That's a personal, idiosyncratic question, I guess. It depends on you. For some people, that would be really helpful, I think, to have accountability partners, especially for certain types of goals. Maybe when it comes to getting off some type of dependency, that could be really helpful as well. Yeah, so yeah, definitely there's value in that. And again, you've got to know yourself, right? You've got to know, is this something that would be helpful for me? Yeah, preparing yourself. Failure is indeed a hard pill to swallow. And often we don't prepare ourselves and then we fail, which is a much harder pill to swallow. But failure is not the end point, right? Failure is a step on the way to achieving the goal. It just might mean we have to readjust the timeline or go back to the drawing board a little bit. Alicia, how do you effectively separate business and personal goals without it overlapping into the other? I feel if something does not go right in the one, it affects the other because I end up feeling demotivated in general. Yeah, that's probably true. And this distinction between our personal lives and our business life, effectively, it's an artificial distinction, right? We don't stop being ourselves when we arrive at work. Yeah, we might want to be more professional there, but we're still the same bunch of atoms that we were when we left home in the morning, right? So we bring our authentic selves there as well. So to have a perfect delinealization between our work stress and our home stress, I think that's an ideal that's often not always not always perfect, and having some grace for ourselves there is important. Right? You often people get upset and they're like, why can't you leave your personal stuff at home? Of course, there's some truth to that. We don't want, people at work, you're completely emotionally bleeding over everybody else. But we also understand they're a human being, and if there's home stuff going on that's big, they're gonna be showing up slightly differently at work. I think some grace there is important, and vice versa. So yeah, with motivation, you have to go down to the whys, right? What is it? You might find that there's a universal why there, the purpose behind it. So when you're getting motivated in your personal life, you might find that there's some universal purpose that's being questioned that also applies in your professional life, and they might feel like different things, but actually there's one thing that's there. If one battles with sleep, I missed that. Again. Oh, sorry, I'll come to that just now. I missed this one. How do you effectively separate business and personal? So that already. How to. Sorry, every time there's a new message, I jump. That's why I'm all over the place. Yeah. How to prevent burnout when chasing your goals? How do I ensure I don't get mentally, physically, emotionally drained? Well, you got to be realistic about that as well, right? People often set such high expectations for themselves because they're afraid of failing, and then they burn out and they fail anyway. So if you realize that unrealistic goals and unrealistic expectations, being too demanding of yourself, is likely to cause failure, you're more likely to have a bit of grace for yourself and take a bit of pressure off yourself. And in doing so, increase your likelihood of success. So balance is important there. Sometimes, you lose the battle and you win the war. You take the afternoon off, you take the week off, and you're more productive in over a 6-month period because of it. I did miss the question. I saw there was a question about taking meds for sleep, and I will. Yeah, there we go. Johannine, if one battles sleep, is it better to take sleeping medication? So yes, that would be better answered by a doctor. I don't want to speak out of turn and give medical advice there. I think sometimes meds are better, sleeping meds are better than not sleeping, but it's worth, first of all, looking at your sleep hygiene. There's often reasons we're finding it hard to sleep. Maybe it's stress related, maybe it's just the practices that we have, before we go to sleep, maybe we're doing other things wrong. Figuring those things out first with professional is helpful, and then, worst case, if you're not sleeping meds sometimes have their place. But again, that's kind of, a doctor would be able to advise on that. See everyone with making a similar point. That's great. We need to discuss finding purpose. I absolutely agree, and we will. That will be one of the topics that we will speak about in the course of the year. I will hope to have everyone back for that. We will do these once a month with me, so they will be advertised again, and we'll have an opportunity to carry on talking about these things. Okay, I don't think I've missed anything. I might have. I hope I've got everybody's questions. How does one cope? Are you asking how does one cope juggling both work, studying, family, everything with Gen Z? So this is a time management question. It really depends. The time management is a personal evaluation of our own life and what's important to us and our own values. But essentially, I think we have to recognize that we have a limited amount of time. There's always going to be demands on us. Life is never going to stop being demanding. And so we have to think, well, what's more important to us? And sometimes that means we have to put certain balls down. We can't do everything all the time. And often effective time management is just making peace with that reality as well as we try to find balance. Kirishni, the answer to your question is I don't know how to prevent blackouts during exams. I don't know. I'd need to know more about that. But it sounds like there might be some type of stress reaction that's happening there that would be helpful to understand more. Unfortunately, might not have time for that today. I'm sorry. Guys, we're over the hour, so I see that now. Sorry, we've gone over by 2 minutes. So let's end it there. Thank you so much to everybody. So nice to have everyone's contributions as well, and we'll be back at it in March, where we'll continue with this series. So thank you again to everyone. Have a great day, and we will chat again next month.